Good morning, First Church. Most mornings at our house start early. Jude is usually up first. Jude is 9 years old. He likes predictability, routine. Jude likes knowing what comes next, and Jude likes animals. He needs things to happen in a certain order, and he needs them to happen pretty quickly. Lincoln is almost 12. He also likes animals, but the rest of that he doesn't really need. But he does need a lot of my attention, and he needs it at the exact same time. I'm their dad. Most days, my job is trying to be in two places at once for two very different boys, both of whom I love more than anything. This isn't a special story, it's just our life. Before anything else, Jude is my son. He loves water. Pools are his favorite place to be. When he's in the water, his whole body relaxes. It's one of the places where the world makes sense to him. Jude also loves routine. He wants to know what comes next, and he wants to know that the people around him are steady. Predictability makes him feel safe. Jude is nonverbal. He doesn't use spoken words to communicate. He communicates with sounds, movement, and if you know him, this repetition. You have to slow down and pay attention. But if you do, it's very clear what he needs and how he's feeling. Jude also happens to have Down syndrome, and he's on the autism spectrum. These words are part of his story, but they're not the first thing I see when I look at him. I see my kid. When Jude was born, we knew that something was wrong. He was born about a month early, and he was almost immediately whisked into the NICU. There were machines, tests, and a whole lot of waiting. For weeks, we lived in that place of uncertainty. We knew that our son was struggling, but we didn't yet know why. His mom had taken a prenatal screening during pregnancy. It was supposed to be 96% accurate, but we were part of the small percentage that slipped on through. When the diagnosis finally came, it wasn't eased into or handled gently. We were called in, sat down, and we were told plainly that Jude had Down syndrome. I remember thinking this should have been a joyful moment. Sorry. My son had survived the NICU. We should have been celebrating. Instead, it felt like the ground shifted under my feet. I thought the hardest part would be accepting the diagnosis. I thought grief might be a moment or a season. What I didn't understand was that loving a child with a disability isn't a single act of acceptance. It's something you have to practice over and over again. These days, every other week, I'm parenting Jude and Lincoln on my own. Most of the work doesn't look very dramatic from the outside. It's routines, it's scheduling, it's making sure everyone gets what they need, even when those needs are very different. With Jude, that often means being his interpreter. He's nonverbal, so I'm constantly translating his sounds, his movements, his stress, and his joy to the world. And then I'm translating the world back to him in ways that Jude can tolerate and understand. With Lincoln, it means making sure he doesn't disappear into the background, making sure Lincoln is seen, heard, and still allowed to just be a kid. There are days when I feel like I'm doing that well, and there are days when I'm very aware that I'm one person who's doing the work of more than one. Single fatherhood hasn't taught me strength the way we usually talk about it. It's taught me how to show up again the next day and how to do the small things that just keep a family moving forward. Looking back, I realized I wasn't completely unprepared for this life, although it felt that way at the beginning. During my undergrad years at the University of Arizona, I worked at a group home for adults with disabilities. I learned very early on that care is rarely efficient and that dignity matters more than speed. And in my first year as an educator, 22 years ago, I wasn't a classroom teacher. I was a paraprofessional working with students with special needs at Amphitheater High School in Tucson. At the time, I thought these experiences were just jobs. Now I see they were teaching me how to slow down, how to pay attention, and how to see the person before the plan. We've only been part of First UCC for about 3 years. For a while, church was one of the few predictable places in my week. It was a mental health anchor, especially on weekends when I had both my boys and very little margin for error. Early on, a nursery rule was changed. An age limit was put in place, and Jude was the only child it affected. On paper, it made sense. Jude is physically older, but developmentally, Jude is right where he needed to be. I was furious. I got the text about the change as my partner Beth and I were landing, coming home from Guatemala. I remember walking off the plane in tears. I felt like one of the few places I could exhale had just disappeared. But what happened next really surprised me. The church didn't defend the rule. They didn't pretend to have an easy answer. They said something rare and honest. They said that they didn't know what to do with Jude. And then they decided to learn. They found Denny to be with me during church. They created a stim room so Jude had a place to regulate and feel safe. Instead of asking Jude to change, the church changed. Since then, Jude has been baptized here, and the church has started a broader effort to become more accessible to people with disabilities. The church didn't just make room for Jude, it let Jude change it. Living with Jude has changed how I understand a lot of things. He's taught me patience, but not in a way that sounds good in theory. It's the kind you learn slowly when plans fall apart, but you have to adjust anyways. Jude's taught me to measure success differently. Some days, it looks like getting through the day without Jude or me having a meltdown. Some days, it looks like a calm moment in a pool, or it looks like a routine that holds. Jude has also changed how I see other people. I'm a teacher, and early on in my career, I used to skim IEPs. They just felt like paperwork. I don't do that anymore. Now I read everyone. Because I know that there's a whole child behind that document, and there's a parent at home just hoping that their kid is understood. Jude didn't just teach me how to parent differently, he taught me how to pay attention. There was a moment when I thought that I might actually be able to do this. After the pandemic, I took the boys on a multi-night road trip. I'd done that with Lincoln before, but I'd never done that with Jude. It felt bigger and it felt riskier. We went to Durango, Colorado, and we stayed in an old schoolhouse in the middle of a meadow. There was no backup plan. It was just the three of us. It wasn't perfect. There were moments when I was sure I made a mistake, but we adapted, we made memories, and we came home just fine. And somewhere in the middle of that trip, I realized that fear hadn't disappeared. It just didn't get to make my decisions anymore. The day we got Jude's diagnosis, I picked up Lincoln from daycare. He was still so little. I remember saying to him, "You're going to have to be strong for your brother." And he looked at me and he said, "Daddy, no. And he was right. What Lincoln has been is something better than strong. He's observant, he's patient, and he advocates for Jude in ways that I didn't teach him. I'm careful to remember that he's also just a kid. Every year, I make time for just him. Last year, we went whitewater rafting. The year before that, we climbed to 14er together. Those trips aren't about making up for anything. They're about making sure Lincoln knows that he gets all of me too. He's Jude's biggest advocate, and on a lot of days, Lincoln's mine. I don't have a neat ending for this story. Jude is still my son. He's still nonverbal. He still loves pools. Lincoln is still growing, and I'm still learning how to do this well. What Jude taught me is that belonging isn't automatic. It's something we have to practice together. It's something that looks like slowing down. Sometimes it looks like admitting you don't know what to do. Sometimes it looks like changing a room or a rule or your expectations. Jude is my son. Jude is perfect. And loving him has taught me that the world gets better, not when people like him learn to fit in, but when the rest of us learn to make room. Thank you.